Good evening. Welcome to our next devotional on 41. We start with chapter 6, so we're finally out of chapter 5. Going through those Beatitudes one verse at a time sure added up. But in chapter 6, starting with verse 1 and going through verse 4, Christ talks about recompense or reward, if you will. Cost-benefit analysis of good behavior, all those sorts of things. So let's listen to the words of Christ. He says, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by others. Truly I tell you, they've received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." I'm reminded of a time when I was a kid and I lived in Elkin, North Carolina, and across the road from us were some neighbors that lived up on a hill, and the driveway was rather steep, and they were not spring chickens, although I thought of them as old then. Now I realize they're probably my age now. But anyway, I came home from church, and my pastor, Jesse Garman, had preached a sermon on this passage about not letting the left hand know what was the right hand was doing when helping somebody else out. And so I believe it was Monday morning. It was very soon after that sermon. And there was a newspaper delivered, as it normally was, at the end of the driveway, which is at the bottom of a hill, for our neighbors. And I saw the newspaper and thought, I should take that up to them. That would be really nice. And so I grabbed the newspaper and I jogged up the hill as a second grader or first grader, whatever I was, is wont to do. It's a hill, you can run up it. Not anymore, but back then I ran up the hill and I was getting ready to give them their paper. In fact, I rang the doorbell and suddenly Pastor Garman's words were in my ear that I'm not supposed to perform my good deeds in public to get recognized for them. And so I ding dong dashed, I guess. I rang the doorbell and suddenly I was scared that I had messed up. And so I put the paper down on the step right in front of their door, and then I ran. They never mentioned it, so I assume either they did not come to the door right away, or they thought it was hilarious, or I have no idea. But I remember this verse making a profound impact on me as a young child because of Jesse Garman's sermon back there in Calvary Wesleyan Church when I was a little kid. And so I want to talk to you today about being careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others in order to be seen by them. So, number one, that is a matter of the heart. In other words, it doesn't say, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others. It doesn't say that. That meaning is not being implied by this sentence. It says, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. And so you're supposed to be careful about the situation of your heart. Why are you doing this? I'm reminded of, and I won't mention the name, but there was a massive corporation that spent, I can't remember the numbers, but they spent something like $1 million to help someone out, some group of people out. And then they spent 10 times as much in advertising to tell the world what they had done. So in other words, in my estimation, and I could be wrong because only God can judge the heart, but in my estimation, when I look at that, I think they just spent $11 million on advertising, $1 million of which just happened to help somebody out. They were promoting themselves. They weren't really helping somebody else out. You see, that's what it means here. Do good deeds. The Bible tells us all the time to do good deeds. Love your neighbor as yourself. The Bible tells us to do that very clearly as well. And it's impossible to help out your neighbor so significantly and yet not be known by them. Now you can manufacture ways in which You can help anonymously through third parties and various and sundries. In fact, the church does this all the time. People faithfully tithe and give to the church, and sometimes above and beyond their tithes, they give to the benevolence fund. And so the church helps people out, and the individuals who made it possible are not known by name. And what that means, very simply, is their intent is one of two, or these two intents. Number one, to just help them out. The desire is to help them with no payment coming back, no grandiosity, no slap on the back, no job well done, guy, I wish I was like you, no esteem of the person being helped to you as an individual. That's not why you did it. Or the second reason why you may have helped somebody else out, and a scripturally legitimate reason. And I want to camp on this point for just a minute, is that you're doing it to get rewarded. You're doing it to get rewarded. Not by the person that you're helping, not by the public in general, not even in this life per se, maybe in this life. But you're doing it to get rewarded by your Father in heaven. Now, let me be clear. The phrase is not say, if you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. It does not state you'll have no reward in heaven. It states that you have no reward from your Father in heaven. This same phraseology has been used by Christ throughout the time to identify that he's speaking of God, your Father in heaven. So if you do it in front of others in order to be seen, in order to be recognized by them, in order to look good in the eyes of others, your Heavenly Father won't reward you. But if when you give to the needy, you do it in a secret way, then, verse 3 and following, but when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. A legitimate reason for Christians helping the needy out is to be blessed by their Heavenly Father. See, this is one of the things I think a lot of people don't understand about Christianity. God knows that we are reasonable, rational creatures, and that we will perform in our own best self-interest. Christians are no different, and God doesn't ask us to be different. He asks us simply to put our faith in what He has promised to us. And so instead of seeking some small pittance in this life, our faith-filled response is to believe His promises and to be investing in eternity, where we will reap eternal reward. Eternal reward. In other words, instead of investing in a 3 to 6% return on your investment, or maybe in some mutual funds 10 to 12% investment on your return, invest in heaven. Not because you don't care about what happens to yourself, but the opposite. God expects you to be rational and faithful. He expects you to act in your own best interest, but to do so in faith, believing that what He has promised is true, putting off that reward from this life so that you can gain a much greater reward in the next that will never end. Christians aren't idiots. Christians aren't looking to beat themselves up to no purpose. There's a reward coming. Are you believing and acting in faith in God's promises? Do you believe that heaven is coming? Do you believe that you will be rewarded in heaven? If so, then help out the needy in ways that they can't know who did it. And one of the best ways you can do that is by donating to your own local church. Our church, like I had mentioned already, above and beyond tithes, if you want to give to help out the needy and it to 100% go to that, then you can give to our benevolence fund. Just write benevolence in the memo line, And so we've helped people out, girlfriends that had been badly abused and had to suddenly find living out a different location. We've helped people that couldn't afford to pay for diapers. We've done all sorts of things like that. And the beauty of my job is that I get to be the one that's on the front lines helping people, but you're the ones that make it possible. So if you believe that what God has promised you is true, that he will reward you eternally, then help the needy out in a way that they can't know who did it. And your Father who is in heaven will reward you. Quick shout out to my former pastor, Jesse Garman, and I hope you're continuing to enjoy your retirement, your grandkids, your wood shop, and your fishing poles. And thank you for preaching this message so long ago. It made an impact on a little boy. Now may our great God and King bless all of you and keep all of you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may you live like you really believe in heaven. Thank you and good night.